Before I dive into this episode, I just want to thank everyone who goes out there every week and purchase Happy and share your experiences with it. I've had so much fun putting this project together, and I look forward to pushing the piece with you. So thank you. You can still find Happy at the Wellington's collection and also Pentecostal bookstores and on Amazon. So make sure you guys go out and support Happy, man.
Because it's something that we encourage in the work that we do, because we know that there are a lot of protective factors that come with someone who prays or someone who has some kind of a religious belief. So for example,
On this episode of Pushing Your Peace podcast, I had the pleasure of sitting down with Tinashe Masango, a highly experienced mental health and well-being practitioner at the Elephant Rooms located at Salt Mills. With over 17 years of expertise in psychiatric nursing, Tinashe has worked across various fields of mental health care, from crisis intervention to specialized therapies like DBT, EMDR, and cognitive behavioral therapy. During this episode, we dived into the P of prayer, exploring its profound benefits in psychological treatment and its essential role in fostering happiness. Tinashe's insights into the integration of spiritual practices with mental health care are truly enlightening. So sit back, relax, and let's get ready to push some peace. Tinashe, thank you so much for coming back on Pushing Your Peace podcast. Like I say, the goal is to have you or some of your members on your team every month as long as this podcast exists. We're going to look at the mental health component of happiness. And for this week, we're going to be talking about prayer. And I want you to tell me, what was your first experience with prayer like?
right, so I was born in a Christian household. I can't say it was a practicing Christian household at that time, because quite early on in my life, my parents separated, so when I was 4 years old. But in the country where I come from, Zimbabwe is a very religious country, Christian country that is. So even if my parents weren't around, church was still something that, you still had to attend. Right? So here and there, I would go to church, and prayer was a standard. So even in the schools, I don't think they do it in all schools now, but back in those days, every school would do the Lord's Prayer, when school is starting or during assembly. And I would say, it was more action than spiritual. It was just doing what we've been taught to do, but I don't think there was any depth, in it. I think it wasn't up until, I would say, I got to my teens, when I started understanding things a little bit more and wanting to understand things a little bit more deeper, that I chose a church to go to. So at that time I went to a Pentecostal church. And it was a different way of praying from what I'd seen in the Catholic Church or the Methodist Church that I'd been to before. So there was a lot of walking around. There was a lot of supplication. Really, is what it was. Just asking God for many things. So that was, I think, was my first kind of entry into seeing what prayer is, and that's what I understood it to be at that time.
And I want to dive into a more personal thing for you now. How has prayer helped you to overcome some of your adversities and trials and tribulations in life?
Right. So, because obviously the whole concept of prayer changed for me. So in my early 20s, I became a Muslim. And being a Muslim, there's a difference between prayer and what we call supplication, right? So prayer in Islam is something that's very structured. So there's specific times that you have to pray, right? So it's prescribed for specific times. So that's 5 times a day. So it's after dawn and before sunrise, you have to pray your first prayer, right? Early hours of the morning. And after that, you pray an afternoon prayer, which is around just after midday. And then between midday and sun going down, there's a middle prayer there. And then when the sun goes down, as soon as it's going down, you pray again. And then lastly, at the end of the night, before you go to sleep, you do your last prayer. So we do 5 prayers. Now what that did for somebody like me in my life is it brought a lot of structure. Right. So it means that everything that I do is actually centered around prayer, and I mean everything. To the point that if I'm making arrangements with people, in my head, I'm thinking, I will see you after afternoon prayer, right? Or I will see you after the evening prayer, right? So which means that this is at the center of my day. If I don't do this, then I don't feel complete. Now, the reason why as Muslims we have to do that is our understanding is that we have to keep this connection with God. So the Arabic word for prayer is salah, right, which comes from a root word which means connection, which means to connect with God. So at least 5 times a day, you have to make sure that that connection is renewed. So it's just a reminder every time of who your Lord is and what your purpose is on this earth. So I suppose it makes me refrain from maybe doing things that I'm feeling pressure to do, or things that I want to be or tempted to do. If the afternoon prayer comes and I'm thinking of doing something, whatever it is going to be gone, because I've just renewed my connection with God at that point in time. So I can say it's definitely been a game changer. Yeah.
You know what? But you know, one of the things that oftentimes, I mean, well, how would I say it? When I was growing up, you know, prayer was something viewed as you going to God and you asking Him for things, and it's like the only time you pray is when you have a request. But I mean, tell me about the way you pray. Is it like that? You know, is it that you're going to Him with these requests, or is it more conversational?
Right. So that's a good question. So the way we pray, or the way we understand it, is no different to how Jesus describes it in the Bible. So the disciples came to Him and asked Him, listen, how are we supposed to pray? And that's when Jesus taught them the Lord's Prayer, you know, our Father who art in heaven. So they were prescribed words. You're supposed to say this specifically, right? So there's blessings just in those words alone and repeating that. And it's remembering, like we said, the magnificence of God and our purpose of being here. That's what it's supposed to be. So, you know, I said earlier to you that there's a difference between prayer and supplication. So I remember when I used to go to the Pentecostal church, a lot of what we called prayer is what I would call supplication today. Now, supplication is separate to prayer in that that's when now you start to make your requests to God. And it's not usually prescribed in any way. You can ask at any time of any day. It's not mandatory. It's not something that you have to do. It's something that you're advised to do, you know, to turn to God. But there is a difference between prayer and supplication. So with prayer, it's mandatory. You don't have a choice. You have to do it. So I think there's a verse in the Bible where Jesus goes to the Garden of Gethsemane, and he tells the disciples that he's going to, you know, they should stop because he's going to go a little bit further. And when he goes a little bit further, he falls on his face, they said, and then he prayed to God. Yeah. And then I think we find that even there's descriptions where he asks God for certain things. That's something that we would call that separate. That's what supplication would be.
So you're telling me there's different types of prayers, right, Tinashe?
So no. So there's in terms of prayer, prayer is pretty much it's the same, right?
It's the same.
It's the same. So in Islam, our prayer, like I said, is prescribed. So we are reciting certain verses of the Quran, right? So similar to the Christians, when Christians have been prescribed to pray, they've been prescribed to pray according to the Lord's Prayer, which is a verse which is verses in the Bible, right? Specifically. So that's a prescription. So you do that. You do not veer outside of that. You don't make up your own things. You just kind of stick to that because that's what God has told you is what is best for you, right? So we do that. That's what we call prayer. And then supplication is different from prayer, right?
Understood.
Supplication is when you then say with your own words or what you want to say to God. God, I'm asking you, for my life to turn this way, or I'm asking for this job to happen this way, or bless my children, bless my mother, bless my wife, that would be something we call supplication, and not prayer.
And can we do two of them in one session, or is it you do supplication at a certain period, or you do prayer at a certain period?
Fantastic. Yeah, that's a good question. So you can actually combine the two. So during prayer, so if you've ever seen a Muslim pray, there's certain things that we do. So like bowing down and going on our foreheads, putting the forehead onto the ground, right? There's a form of worship while we're praying. Is something we do. And when we're there, we're at our most vulnerable to God. So it's that time that we feel that we're actually the closest to God. And you can make your supplication even during that time, right? So you can combine your prayer and your supplication. That shouldn't be a problem. Or you can keep them separate if that's something that you wish to be able to do. So like I said, supplication can literally be at any time, in any way you kind of decide to do it. Whereas prayer is very specific. You do it this way, you do it that way, and you don't kind of move away from that.
I want to touch on the mental health component of prayer now. Do you notice differences in your well-being after you pray, or even your clients?
Oh yeah. So for me personally, 100% it does for me. For my clients, even during the assessment period, so the first few sessions that we meet, I try and kind of ascertain what their beliefs are, if they're spiritual or if they're religious, because it's something that we encourage in the work that we do, because we know that there are a lot of protective factors that come with someone who prays or someone who has some kind of a religious belief. So for example, if someone is feeling depressed or suicidal and they come to me and they say, well listen, I attend the Roman Catholic Church, the chances of them actually completing suicide are very low, because in their beliefs they believe that if you kill yourself you're not going to go to heaven, right? So religious beliefs, they play a huge part in kind of people's well-being, and that's just one part, in terms of the protective factors, but also just kind of the belief and understanding that I'm connecting with a greater being who can protect me, or who can also get me out of this predicament as well. Has a very positive effect on the outcomes, of the therapy and support that we give people over here. So we encourage people, no matter what religious beliefs you hold or spiritual beliefs you hold, that they should be practicing them while we are supporting them.
Now, in the Christian community, there's this idea that we can pray away our mental health disorders. Is this true? Can you really tap in and pray, and my anxieties or whatever I'm dealing with would be gone? Is that true?
So there's some truth in that. Except that it's not the whole truth, right? So I believe there's a verse in the Bible that says something to the effect of prayer without works is not valid. Is that right?
Yeah, prayer without works is dead. Yeah, so same thing.
Dead. Yes, absolutely. So that's it really. We're not meant to just pray and just expect that God is just going to do things. We are also expected to play a part and do what needs to be done, right? So if you know that you're ill in any way, whether it's physically or psychologically, then God has also provided a cure for you. So you're still expected to go and get that cure, and then God will ensure that that cure works, right? So rather than just sitting and saying, I'm just going to pray it away, or I'm just going to pray here and $1 million is just going to show up on my lap, I don't know of any belief systems that actually believe that. I think most belief systems that I know of, whether Christian or Islam or otherwise, there is a need for people to actually put in work, to get themselves better on top of prayer.
But how do we break that stigma with prayer? That I'm afraid to go see a psychologist or a specialist or a practitioner because I don't want society to view me as this. How can we use prayer or even supplication to overcome these things?
So I think, like most things whenever stigma is involved, it's ignorance, it's not knowing. So it's a lack of understanding of our own scriptures, right? So, like we just gave this example of that verse in the Bible of saying that, listen, if you just pray and you don't do the work, then it's dead. Yeah. So it's people being able to be taught within the churches that, listen, this is actually what your religion teaches. You are understanding things differently, but actually what you're being taught in the religion is this. This is the same thing in Islam as well. So when I was working in the West Midlands in the UK, there's a huge Muslim population over there, and unfortunately some people weren't aware that in Islam that we do believe that mental illness is a real thing and that you can go and receive treatment, right? So there's some population who believe that it is only possession, being possessed by what I think the Christians would call demons, and that's what they will say is mental illness, without really knowing that no, actually there is mental illness that is identified within the beliefs and that would require treatment. Well, and the belief with Islam and many other religions is this, is whatever treatment you're going to get, God has provided that treatment for you. So what you need to do is you need to connect with God, because God will either decide whether that treatment is going to work or not. So your connection or your prayer to God or your requests or your supplications to God is always going to be, can you make this work, or can you make me better, through my actions of taking this medication or through my actions of attending therapy. Yeah. So what we started doing here, like in the Elephant Rooms, is going to churches. So we actually, in June, the last church we attended was Maranatha, and that's the Seventh-day Adventist over in Blue Hill. So they invited us over to talk about, just mental health, and the engagement was just amazing. I think a lot of us really assume that that churches are really far behind with this, but in reality, when I've stepped into the churches, it's been the complete opposite. I think another church is Harvest Bible Church with Pastor Kenyatta, or Bishop Kenyatta as well, and he actually has people within the church who have trained in things like counseling and and therapy, who support the church goers over there as well. So there's work that's already being done, and wherever we're invited in terms of kind of with churches, we're happy to come down and speak about mental health and what kind of support is out there for people.
You said something interesting, and I want to zero down on it much more. You mentioned a church having mental health practitioners present and counselors present to teach mental health and to help people out. Should this be something that's done in all churches, one, based on your opinion, and two, should the government get involved and mandate that all churches have some sort of counseling, some personnel with counseling background inside the institution? It's a lot I said, but yeah.
No. You know what? You make a very good point, right? Because one thing that policy that's being pushed is these employee assistance programs, right? So this is being pushed on a lot of companies to say, listen, you need to have that, and as part of that, you need to have some kind of psychological support for your employees, right, as a standard. So I think this should be for anybody and everyone, including churches, to say we need to be pushing that support, because we recognize that this is a real issue. And a lot of people will actually turn to church when they're struggling. So they're struggling with anxiety, struggling with depression. One of the first places they'll go, either to church or the mosque or the temple, wherever it is that people kind of worship. So it would be fantastic if all these places were equipped to be able to look after their own congregants. And of course, this would be great if they could receive support from the government to be able to do that as well. It could be in the form of training. So like with Harvest Bible, I think that's exactly what they do. They reach out to trainers. I think they asked me to come in for one session just to teach on assessment. And yeah, so it's just on different things, to be able to kind of support their own congruence.
Now I want to segue into the second half of the show, where you get an opportunity now to talk about a word that begins with the letter P. that has helped you in the context of this discussion that we're having now?
So any letter, any word with a letter
Any word that
P.
begins with the letter P.
Mm. Apart from prayer, of course.
Apart from prayer.
That's all right. Um, um, yeah, well, the easiest one for me is psychological therapies. Yeah.
Let's go
So
with that.
yeah, so I would say it's a matter of just marrying the two, prayer and psychological therapies, and knowing that the two don't have to be separate. That these two do work very well together. You know, one aspect of prayer that we didn't kind of look at is the mindfulness side of prayer. You know, where we're normally living in a future that doesn't exist, meaning we find ourselves very anxious about things that may or may not happen. You know, will I get this job, or are things going to work out well for me in the future? Or living in the past that we've left behind, traumas that we've had. When we're being mindful, we're saying that we're coming to the present and what's going on now. And there's very few things that are more mindful than when you decide to say, at this moment in time, I'm going to connect with my creator, and I'm going to be aware of who I am at this moment in time and what's going on with me. And prayer kind of provides that. So, mindfulness is a very big tool that we use in the work that I do. So that connection right early on is already there. And of course, like I said, for any of the therapies that we're doing, any of the support or the medication that we might be prescribing people, it's also important that we find that people pray, because that puts them in a place of peace, in a place of more contentment. And one thing we know about recovery is that recovery requires that peacefulness and that contentedness. And you find whether you're struggling with physical or psychological difficulties, that will improve or help you to recover much faster.
I remember when I went to university, and on the campus they had an actual prayer room. So I found this to be very interesting, but then also accommodating, because it showed me that this university was highly invested in our well-being and also respected our beliefs. And the prayer room is open 24/7. You can always go inside there and have that time. And you know how stressful university can be, just dealing with the pressures of your grades and the financials. So I found prayer in that environment to be very soothing, amongst other things that were going on, like being in physical programs. And there was also a counseling department. Like, you can go there and you get therapeutic sessions there at the university. And so I mentioned that to say that it supports your theory that prayer, along with therapy, psychological therapies, it goes hand in hand. And in other institutions, first world countries, they recognize this. Because if they didn't recognize it, there wouldn't be a prayer room inside that university.
Yeah.
So there has to be some sort of connection and benefit to it, to our well-being.
Absolutely. There's tons of research. So even if we want to kind of make this something scientific, which it is, and we want to look, yes, definitely. In fact, the Royal College of Psychiatry in the UK, they have a specific psychiatrist who looks at just religion and psychiatry and marrying those two together, right? So imagine that, just specifically for that. So it is something that we know for a fact is very, 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 very important. Yeah.
Tinashe, is there do's and don'ts to praying? Is there things you shouldn't do, or is in things that you should do? I know you mentioned supplication, the separation between supplication and prayer, and also being aligned with the way the Bible told us to pray. But is there other things that we should be doing or not be doing when we pray?
So one thing is, times, keeping to the times that you pray, whatever is prescribed for you to be able to pray. I think there's always a lot of wisdom behind what we're being told to do, or the times that we're being told to be doing these things. So making sure that you stick to it, and making sure that you don't skip your prayers as well. Don't say, okay, all right, maybe I haven't had time, and prioritizing other things. So I had a very good friend of mine who was a CBT therapist, but she was also a Buddhist. And I remember asking me one time, Tinashe, listen, how often do you meditate? Right? And I said, oh, listen, I haven't really had time. And she said, well, yeah, that's why you don't have time, because you don't meditate, right? And what I kind of took from that is this, because me as a Muslim, obviously, I didn't realize that, no, actually, what she's telling me is that because if you don't pray, then it's going to feel like a lot of things are not going to be going well for you. You won't have time for anything. The day becomes longer. But I find that for sure when I make that time to say that, and it's only 5 minutes, at most, for a prayer. If I make that time in that specific time, the way the day goes is always absolutely amazing. So just stick to the prescribed times, that you're supposed to be praying. And sincerity in your prayer is also very, very, very important. That you're very sincere about what you're asking, because if we're saying that, you are connecting with God, so now we're talking more around kind of, the prayer that is here. If you're connecting to God and you're not really being sincere in what you're saying, and maybe your mind is elsewhere, you're busy thinking about work things or fun things, then it ruins the prayer for you. So you want to be sincere in your prayer. Also, knowledge as well is a do. You need to know as much as you can about the prayer, because here we are today, we're speaking about the difference between prayer and supplication, and how those two are different, or how at times they can be used in connection. But knowing and reading your scriptures and understanding that is also very important. The don'ts, I'm trying to think if there's any more don'ts. I would just say, just don't go outside of what is prescribed. If you believe that God is all-knowing and God has created you, then the manual has been written for you about how prayer is supposed to be. So just follow it as it is. And if we start to follow someone else's beliefs or your own beliefs, I can just imagine I just wake up today and decide that prayer is going to be us playing a drum, right? And everybody starts playing a drum and saying that we're praying. That means really people are following my teachings. And what I'm actually saying is that my teachings are better than God's teachings. So whatever it is that you're going to do, you need to stick to what you've been taught and what is actually prescribed for you, which means that you need knowledge and you need to read about it and understand it.
Make sure we are aligned with God's will. Let His will be done.
Absolutely.
Tinashe, I just want to thank you once again for coming on. And as you are well aware, you wouldn't be a guest on one of my shows if I didn't ask you a spin-off question. Are you ready?
That's all right. Go on, man.
So if you had a chance to for a do-over in life, what would you have done differently?
Leo, I have a bad past, That's a difficult question to ask a man who has a bad past. But if I could erase anything I did in my early 20s, yeah, I would say I would erase everything from 19 to 21. Yeah, but jokes aside, though, Leo, right? I don't think I would erase anything. I'll tell you why I wouldn't erase anything. I think everything wrong or right that happens in my life is meant to happen, and it's what I decide to take out of that, right? Either I'm going to grow from it, or I'm going to allow it to stunt my growth, and do things probably that I'm not supposed to be doing, right? So wrong things won't stop happening. I won't stop making mistakes. I won't stop going through trauma. I won't stop, that's going to happen, but I know that it's leading me to a place of growth.
Profound. Tinashe Masango, thank you for being a guest once again on Pushing Your Peace podcast. Any final words before we close out?
Really, just to say to people, the importance, like I said, of spirituality and religion in their lives, especially when you're getting to a point where you start to feel hopeless. That's the first place you want to start. Secondly, is to encourage people to, as individuals, to research things themselves. Right, whatever it is, research about your own beliefs, research about other beliefs, because ultimately, when you get to a certain age in your life, it becomes a choice about what direction you want to be able to take, and you want to follow something that is based on knowledge that you've understood, right? And it will mean a lot more to you. So earlier we were talking about sincerity. There is no sincerity without knowledge.
Powerful. And there's a lot of church people that's listening to this episode who may feel a lot of comfort knowing that I can actually pray when I go to therapy. So where can they reach you? How can they find you so they could book a session?
So we're so the Elephant Rooms, we are at number 45 Salt Mills Plaza, and just so you guys know, everybody who works here has very different spiritual and religious backgrounds. So we've got Christians, we've got Muslims, we've got Buddhists, we've got atheists, but whatever belief you have, we make sure that we cater, because it is about you guys, it's not about us. Right? Today I spoke a lot about myself, but in reality, whenever we're in these rooms, it's about you and what you believe in. So number 45 Salt Mills Plaza is where we're based, and you can also get in touch with us on our emails. That's at admin@theelephantrooms.com. Yeah, and also we have a phone number which is 342-5498. You can also send WhatsApp messages on that.
Ladies and gentlemen, Tinashe Masango, mental health practitioner at the Elephant Rooms in Grace Bay. It's been a pleasure having him on, and I will see you guys next week on Pushing Your Peace podcast.